Oh, you're here. Good. I was hoping for company. You see, I've got stories, dark ones, chilling ones, the kind that keep you up at night. Mythical creatures, curses, horrors you can't escape. Shall we begin? Don't worry, I won't bite. Much.
This is a story everyone in our village knows. Ever since that night, no one has dared to ignore the old traditions. We all make sure to follow the rules passed down by our ancestors, fearing what might happen if we don't. What happened to Joe serves as a chilling reminder of why these customs exist. On a chilly autumn night, Joe dragged his exhausted body back to his hometown. It had been years since he last returned to this small village nestled at the foot of the mountains. The streets were eerily quiet, with only a few dim lights flickering in the distance. "Joe?" A familiar voice called out from the village's small convenience store. He turned and saw his childhood friend, Lee Daquan. "Joe, you're finally back." Daquan handed him a bottle of beer, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, here for the funeral," Joe replied in a low voice. Daquan fell silent for a moment, then patted Joe on the shoulder. "Your mother passed so suddenly. But listen, be careful. Strange things have been happening in the village lately." Joe frowned. "What kind of strange things?" "Did you forget the old village rule? When someone dies, their body must not be moved for 3 days. A Taoist master must perform the guiding ritual, sealing the 7 orifices with yellow talismans, and the family must burn soul-guiding incense to ensure the spirit finds its way to the underworld. Otherwise, the soul lingers in this world, becoming a wandering ghost, or worse, a vengeful spirit." Daquan hesitated, lowering his voice. "But your mom, she wasn't resting peacefully. Some of the elders said they saw shadows moving around your house at night." Joe sighed, staring at the ground, exhaustion lacing his voice. "Daquan, I've been working outside the village for so many years. I don't have time to think about all these old traditions. Aren't they just outdated superstitions?" He paused, then let out a dry laugh. "Besides, when someone dies, they're gone. How can a soul really linger?" Daquan opened his mouth as if to say something, but eventually just shook his head. "All right, I hope nothing happens." Late at night, Joe lay on the wooden bed in his old house. Memories of his mother drifted through his mind. He remembered how she used to sit by the door, mending clothes, pulling him into her arms when it got cold, rubbing his cheeks with her warm hands. "Joe, are you cold?" she'd ask. Back then they were poor. His mother worked odd jobs to raise him, often going without meals so he could eat. As he grew older and busier with work in the city, his visits home became fewer and farther between. The last time he saw her, she had simply held his hand and smiled. "Work is important, but don't forget to come home now and then." A pang of guilt tightened his chest. He shut his eyes, forcing himself to sleep, as if that could make the regret go away. Suddenly, a rustling sound echoed through the room. Joe's eyes snapped open, darting toward his mother's shrine. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows, and one of the yellow talismans on the altar had fallen to the ground. He bent down to pick it up and noticed messy handwriting scrawled on its surface. "Welcome home." A chill crawled up his spine. The next morning, Joe rushed to the only person in the village who still performed traditional rituals, Master Wu, the village's exorcist. Joe hurriedly explained what had happened the night before. "Joe, Did you handle your mother's funeral properly?" Master Wu's face had already turned pale the moment he saw him. "I just didn't perform the guiding ritual. What's the big deal?" Joe asked, puzzled. Master Wu slammed his hand on the table, his expression a mix of anger and fear. "Fool, do you not understand? Your mother's soul is trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. She came back for you last night." His voice lowered as if restraining some deep-seated dread. "Tell me, did you hear footsteps outside your house? Smell anything familiar? Did you see her in your dreams, standing beside your bed?" Joe let out a dry laugh, forcing a smirk, though his grip on the talisman trembled slightly. "Come on, Master Wu, that's ridiculous. My mom just passed. Are you seriously telling me she turned into a ghost overnight?" Master Wu's face darkened. He grabbed a handful of yellow talismans and shoved them into Joe's hands. "Tonight, stick these on your doors and windows, and listen to me no matter what you hear. Do not open the door." Joe, still skeptical, took the talismans but followed the instructions anyway, placing them around his house before going to bed. That night, just as he was dozing off, he heard something strange in the courtyard. Then came a soft knocking on the door. A familiar voice called out, "Joe, open the door." His entire body stiffened. "Joe, it's cold outside." A piece of paper slid through the crack beneath the door. "It's me, your mother. Open the door." Joe stared at the note, his heartbeat hammering in his chest. Inside the house, the yellow talisman suddenly burst into flames. Gritting his teeth, he squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears, refusing to respond to the voice outside. Time crawled by. Eventually, dawn broke. Joe hesitantly opened his eyes. The house was silent again. Summoning his courage, he took a deep breath, bracing himself for what lay beyond. His mind raced with the possibilities. Would he see his mother standing there, eyes hollow and lifeless? Would the doorway lead to something far worse? His hands trembled as he reached for the handle, a cold sweat forming on his back. Finally, with a sharp inhale, he opened the door. There was no sign of his mother. He let out a shaky breath and turned, only to freeze in place. On the shrine, his mother's funeral portrait had changed. She was smiling now, a strange, unfamiliar smile. A cold sweat broke out on his back. The portrait had never shown her smiling before. Then, from outside the house, a voice, low and eerie, whispered again, "Joe, you forgot to open the door for Mom." Joe bolted from the house and ran straight to Master Wu's place, panting heavily as he banged on the door. The old exorcist immediately understood what had happened and dragged Joe inside, lighting several sticks of incense. He quickly drew a complex formation on the ground. "Stand in the middle of the talisman circle. Your mother's spirit is trapped. If we don't help her move on, she'll never rest." Joe stood trembling as Master Wu chanted incantations, burning talismans and tossing them into a copper basin. Black smoke filled the room, and a gust of icy wind rushed past them. A familiar voice wept through the air. "Joe, Mom doesn't want to leave you." Tears welled up in Joe's eyes, but he clenched his jaw and stood firm. Master Wu's voice boomed, "The road to the afterlife is open. Depart in peace." A pale figure flickered in the smoke. His mother, her face filled with sorrow and longing. "Take care, my son." And then she was gone. Silence settled over the room. Joe collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Master Wu let out a heavy sigh. "She's at peace now. Next time, don't ignore the old ways." Joe nodded, his heart heavy. He had truly lost his mother this time, but at least she had found peace.